We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. By the time you hear this, it's Monday. I'm recording this Sunday night, and we have Tony with us from South Carolina. I wanted to thank Tom Powell Jr. for joining us yesterday, and I was watching portions of it today, and I go, well, that's pretty good. And basically, two grumpy old men just chatting away about what's going on in the world. So I said, well, let's change it up for Monday. And then I realized we're not changing it up at all. We got another grumpy old man in this motherfucker, so we're going to do the same thing. So
Well,
Tony, thanks for
I
joining
was
me.
listening. Yeah, no, I was listening to the two of you guys, and you're kind of like bonding on being as old as you were, and you mentioned a number of times when you were born, 1960, and so you're like me, you're a boomer, and he's a Gen Xer, and I've got you by about 5 years. So you have Tom, and then I have you. So yeah, this is definitely rational boomer or podcast for us old guys to just sit and bitch and complain about the world.
I should be careful calling Tom an old man. I can call you an old man because you're my age or a little older. Tom's actually 12 years younger than I am. Tom is actually like about 54 or 53, and I'm 65. So he's an older man. He's not old by
No,
comparison.
he's
I'm
he's
certainly
younger
the
than my
old one.
wife.
Yeah,
He's younger than my
yeah,
wife.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
but he's got the look down.
he's got the look down, and he is a curmudgeon. And I think
Yep.
he would appreciate. I don't think he'd fight me on that. He's
Nope.
absolutely a curmudgeon. I am too, and I'm proud of that fact. Well, it's been a while since we've talked, and as always the case, some crazy shit has happened.
A
We've
lot.
got what's going on in Minneapolis, and I'm sure you have some insights about that,
Yep. A lot.
especially regarding the shooting and such. So, in South in South Carolina, where you are, when you saw all this shit go down, Alex Pretty being shot in the way he was shot, what was your take on the whole situation?
Well, Renee Good. That shooting didn't have to happen. So, pretty much I was in agreement with untrained ICE agent when he called her a fucking bitch. That told me all I needed to know about that group of men that were there. But with Alex Preddy, that was just plain cold-blooded daylight murder. There was absolutely I don't understand. Well, I do understand because we've been watching this administration through two terms now. Um, but they're going to get away with it until we change out the president and change out the administration. But that was just plain cold-blooded murder. There were enough viewpoints. Um, Trump is on his back foot because of the politics of it. The Republicans, some tried to defend it as saying that he was interfering with legitimate law enforcement, but there really wasn't a way to do it. And every interview that I saw where they had a Republican on, they generally lose the argument, and you can just see the embarrassment. I frankly think that we now need to, now we need to completely disband ICE. So the next presidential, there's no salvaging it. Um, they're going to have to rebuild it from the ground up. There's not enough training. There's supposedly, 47 days of training or something like that in honor of this fucking moron that we have as president. They're not trained. I've had more training in my military career than these guys will ever have, and they shouldn't be allowed. But in addition to poorly being trained, it's pretty obvious that they were told to go out and create a climate of fear.
Right.
Whether it is in anticipation of the midterms to let them loose as the president's militia, or whether it is just to intimidate people into keeping quiet. And God bless the people in Minnesota where you are. I mean, truly a community of heroes. I don't think they expected what folks were. I thought Portland was amazing, to be honest. I expect things like that in LA and New York and Chicago, but Minnesotans have a reputation for being a very nice folk. But man, the bravery was just inspiring every day to go out in that cold. I can't even get my dogs to go out, and we're at 28 degrees, which is a spring day for you guys.
Yeah, I'm proud to say that I personally think those Minnesotans that go out and protest in sub-zero temperatures and deal with the risks of dealing with ICE agents, with the gas, with the guns, with all the stuff. They truly are heroes. And I just wanted to bring something. I got a number of things to bring up with this, but something that's going to drive Donald Trump nuts. And I don't know if you heard this. They choose the nominees for the Nobel Peace Prize by the end of January. That's why he couldn't have been considered last time around because he'd only been in office 10 days. But they choose the nominees for the Nobel Peace Prize. Donald Trump's not going to be one of those nominees. Not surprising
Absolutely.
because he's an evil motherfucker. But you know who is going to be a nominee?
Citizens of Minnesota. That's what I heard.
Well, City of Minneapolis and the
City of
citizens of
Minneapolis.
Minneapolis. And that's never happened before. Now, I don't know if they're going to win, but that's going to piss off Donald Trump. It's all about Donald Trump fucking up. He comes in here, tries to scare us, tries to roll over the top of us, can't do it, and on top of it, they get the Nobel Peace Prize. Now that's fucking hysterical.
Yeah, I mean, their mayor would be the one probably to pick it up along with the, your current governor. But they got a good chance because the bravery matches the same bravery as what you saw in Iran. Now, obviously the ICE agents couldn't do what they're doing in Iran, but it's not because they wouldn't do it if they were given the orders to do it. I
Right.
mean, yeah. So, but just to stand out there with a phone and confront these guys, and as far as Preddy was concerned, I mean, he was just doing what is in his nature to do, which is he was just being helpful and good and heroic and trying to help up a lady, and he ends up dead. I just don't. I just hope that there's justice for the two of them. And we're talking about two white people who got shot. As I understand it, there's 8 more people of color that have been killed by ICE and border agents in the last few months. So it's not
That's
just
true.
those two, and their names are forgotten. And I hope that someday that there's a memorial put up that puts the names of everybody that's gotten killed there somewhere at a national level monument someplace because they all deserve it.
Well, we know the name of the person who shot Renee Good. His name is
Yes,
Jonathan Ross. And the way we found that out was Christine Elm fucked up and talked about a specific case that this person was in, and it was kind of an unusual case because he was dragged by a car. So it was easy to find out his name. So we know who murdered Renee Good. Now, in the case of Alex
Pretty,
Preddy,
pretty.
they all had masks on, and nobody really knew who they were. And somebody asked me, "Will we ever know who they are?" And I said, "I don't know how, but one way or another, we will know who they are. It
I
will
agree.
come out
I agree.
tonight on this Sunday night." ProPublica came out with the names of those two gentlemen that did the shooting. And ProPublica is a pretty legitimate source. You can trust them.
Uh, Sure.
But here's the irony about who did the shooting. These are border control agents. They're there to protect the border, but they're in Minneapolis shooting this white guy who is a citizen. And the names of those two people, the first one was Jesus Ochoa, and the other one was Raimundo Gutierrez. It's just so fucking backward. We've got these Hispanic people, and I don't know if they're illegal or illegal immigrants. It really doesn't matter. They're murderers over and above it. It doesn't matter what race they are. But it just seems ironic. We have border control agents who are supposed to protect the borders and keep illegal immigrants out. They end up in Minneapolis killing a citizen of the United States of America and the city of Minneapolis. That's what's fucked up about this. And at least we know who did it now.
Yeah, I mean, so what's going to happen is the same thing that happened with the other. They'll put them in some kind of witness protection. I mean, their houses are being emptied out and they're being sent someplace. Um, and but I'm at some point they will face justice. There's no statute of limitations for murder, and so no matter how you look at it, both those cases were murder. They're not going to call it an accident or an action
Or justified, no.
or justified or anything like that. There's going to be no immunity for them in the long run. Um, it sucks that they were Hispanic that did it, but I've been watching enough of these videos to know that there's quite a few Latinos, particularly within the Border Patrol. And to be honest, they don't belong in the cities. They belong back on the borders. Now, will
Right.
they go? They just don't belong there, and they're plussing up ICE in a way that doesn't seem to make any sense whatsoever without enough training. So, who's in charge now? Is it
Well,
the new
Tom
fella?
Homan is a border
Holman.
czar.
Yeah, Tom Holman. So Tom Holman, he's a piece of shit, and but he'll be a little bit more sensitive to things than Bovino. And he's been given, as far as I understand it, marching orders from Trump to be a little bit more discreet and not confront protesters. I don't know how you can do that since protests are citywide. And as soon as an ICE vehicle or a Border Patrol vehicle is seen, or any government vehicle, residents are notified. The residents are going to be out there to confront them at every step.
Yeah, it's pretty organized out there, and the people of Minnesota. I've often said they're Minnesota nice until you fuck with them, and then they get together and they kick some ass, and that's what's happening. And we haven't even seen the worst potential out of these people as yet. Depends on how far they're pushed and how many egregious things they do. But if you walk around the city and you talk to people, everybody I talk to has an emotion about this stuff. They're either older and terrified, but most people are just pissed. Let me give you an example. I'm in a restaurant with my wife and my daughter in law's aunt, who we're friends with. Okay. We're in a restaurant over on the east side of St. Paul in the suburbs. And we're sitting there, nice place, having a nice dinner. And my wife looks over and sees five guys who look like ICE agents, but they're not in uniform of any kind. They have no distinguishing ways to say they're ICE. It's just the demeanor. It's just five guys sitting alone. And she said, when they leave, go out and see what kind of car they get into. And I go outside as they're leaving, and they all five jump into this huge, big black pickup truck with Texas plates. And they head across the parking lot to a hotel, the Spring Hill Suites, where we know some of them have been staying. But I'm sitting there with two 65-year-old women, and they're trying to figure out what the fuck can we do? Can we take their pictures? Can we put them on Facebook? Should we slash their tires? I'm going, you girls are 65. I think you better just stand down a little bit. You probably
Exactly,
don't want to
exactly.
get,
Yeah.
but that's the intensity people have in this country or in this city and in the state. They are fucking angry about this. They're ready to fight. And I don't think Donald Trump or ICE, Tom Homan or Greg Bovino had any idea what they were walking into because people take great offense to you stepping on their toes in their own home city. You don't do that in fucking Minneapolis.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, your local news channels covered a lot of this, did they not?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, so it wasn't the mainstream, lamestream CBS that were covering this. It was your local channels covering it. And I'm
Right.
I'm guessing they actually showed what was going on. The knocking people to the ground, the pushing of protesters, the dragging of protesters, all of it. The poor fellow got dragged out with hardly any clothes on into the bitter cold. I mean, that all of it, by mass thugs. So I think it's going to be hopefully it'll be a long time before a Republican is elected in Minnesota. As if I understand it right, Minnesota's split in half between Republicans, your legislature, and your Democrats.
Well, maybe in the legislature. I don't know that there's much similarities. Well, maybe there is a similarity in size. We're mostly a blue state.
Right.
We've got a blue governor. We've had a blue governor for a while. Um, we do have some different things in the legislature, and a lot of that has to do with gerrymandering and all that bullshit. We're mostly a blue state, and the people in the red districts are starting to find themselves on the run here a little bit. Um, Minnesotans aren't going to stop. That's the one thing about the people of Minnesota. Donald Trump has come out and acting like they are pulling back. And maybe they are pulling back on the surface. Well, when I heard Tom Homan talking as he came in, they said, well, are you pulling back? You're pulling people out? And he said something that I think pissed off a lot of Minnesotans. He said basically what Donald Trump said in a softer tone. Well, if, we're negotiating that right now. You're negotiating whether or not to get the fuck out of my state where you don't belong. Well, we got to get them to do this and do that. Here's the thing: when you talk about old Scandinavian people, they're fucking stubborn as hell. They ain't gonna give
Oh,
you
yeah,
shit. You
yeah,
aren't
no,
getting anything. You
no.
better plan to stay a while and get your ass kicked or leave. And Donald Trump is just not capable of backing down because he's got this fragile ego and he doesn't want to give the idea that he lost, in spite of the fact that's all he does is fucking lose.
Yeah, I mean, his last his effort to get your voter rolls. That's not going to happen.
No,
That's not going to happen, and it just makes him look like this is all about the voter rolls. This was all about intimidation. It makes it looks,
and it is.
so and so. Luckily, that everything that happened in Minnesota and Portland and other cities, is living on the internet, and it just keeps circulating around over and over. It is building a movement. The people of Minnesota and Minneapolis, they were pretty fucking organized. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
they received training. I mean, there are organizations that trained them how to follow and trained them what to do in case of this or what to do in case of that, what to say if they show up, the effort to tell people what their rights were. If they show up at your house, they better have a warrant by a judge, not one of these administrative warrants they were talking about. And if they try to break in your house, make sure that you get it recorded and get the record of the film out. Get the all the images and the video out.
We had a situation in Mankato, which is a small town south of Minneapolis, about maybe an hour or so. It's a good sized town, it's a college town. Um, and this woman is going down the street and she's following an ICE vehicle. She's got a dash cam. That's who she is. She's watching over these ICE guys. She's documenting what's going on. These ICE guys stop the car. They get out, walk toward the car with their guns drawn. She hadn't done a fucking thing. Guns drawn. She's immediately on the phone calling two or three people, say, look, they're coming to get me. I need some backup with this. We need to get the sheriff out here. We need to do this. We need to do that. Well, of course, these guys come up with their guns pointed at her. They open the car door. They drag her out and throw her in the car. Now, whoever was working with her got on the phone real quick to the sheriff and all that stuff. And I don't know where they were taking her, but they got a fucking phone call from their boss in ICE. And apparently the sheriff got through to him and said, we're going to arrest all you motherfuckers. They turned around, dropped her off back where they picked her up, and just sped off. So they know what they're doing is wrong. And there are some law enforcement agencies that are pushing back on ICE. But that kind of thing happened. There was one bit of good news too, and I'm sure you heard about this. One of the things that triggered Minnesotans more than anything was seeing that little 5-year-old boy,
Yeah,
Liam
yeah, yeah. Liam
Ramos,
Ramos.
with the bunny hat on. Poor little kid standing there. Um, they were using him for bait. And then they had the audacity to say, well, his dad ran away, just left him there. We're just protecting him. Yeah, you're protecting him by putting him in a fucking detention center in a state he's never been in. What really happened there was the wife was in the house, the dad was with the kid, and the kid was on the sidewalk. And as soon as he saw the ICE agents, he ran up to the door to tell his wife, do not open the door under any circumstances. And then he started coming back. That's what they're trying to say, that he abandoned the kid, which didn't happen. So they pick up the dad and they pick up the kid, both legally here. They're in some process for
Oh
immigration.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They are.
They
They're
take
from
them, they
Ecuador,
take
I
them,
think.
yeah, they pick them up and they take them to Dilley, Texas, put them in this horrific detention camp. Um, and then the little guy is sick and depressed and upset and whatever. So he's not doing well at that point. And I said to somebody, I said, how stupid can you be if I'm Trump or anybody in the Trump administration and I find out a 5-year-old kid that I put in detention is sick? I'm getting that kid out of there as quickly as possible, putting him in the best hospital and getting him better as quickly as we possibly can. Because something happens to that kid in detention, this fucking country's going to go up in flames. People are not going to tolerate that. Good news is, though, a judge ordered to release him. Um, a representative from Texas went there, got him out, and brought him back to Minnesota. So his dad and the 5-year-old boy are back home safe. So that's one of the few positive stories
Yeah.
that we
But
can
he
tell.
was only one of four taken
Well,
out
yeah,
at that school district. So yeah, he's back. There's three others that are not back. Um, and
exactly.
the
There's other
country's not
kids
going
in
to
there.
stand for this. The country's not going to
No.
stand for it. The country is not standing for it. There's not much we can do without a party in power helping us along, but we can vote. It's a shame we have to wait to vote. And we can do what the people of Minneapolis are doing, which is stand up and protest and stand up as brave as they are.
You know, I'm hoping, I've always said with Donald Trump, he's a bully. So all you need to do is stand up to him, whether you be a media person or a political person, get in his face and push back. And he'll always back off because he's a bully. He's a coward at heart. And I'm hoping that what we've seen out of Minnesota is enough of a trigger for other cities to say, wow, they did it. Maybe we can do it. And hopefully it builds some momentum of city after city getting more bold and pushing back. Because he's not going to walk out of Minnesota winning anything. This is
No,
a big
no,
loser for
no.
him.
It's a loss. It's an absolute political loss. My understanding, he's supposedly headed towards a red state, but it'll be another blue city in a red state. So, okay, go ahead and do that. We have a little bit of ice around here, but not much in South Carolina. And I know for a fact we have a bigger immigrant or illegal population than Minnesota has. They're out in the fields, they pick peaches, they're in construction down here, and yet you don't see them, it's a tiny presence in comparison. So
Do you know what state has the largest illegal immigrant population?
I would almost say Texas.
It's absolutely Texas. But we don't hear people being. And Minneapolis, Minnesota, probably has the least amount of immigrants in
Right. You
it.
have a few Somalis and that's about it.
And we have Hispanic folks, and we do have some immigrants, but by comparison, it's relatively small compared to Texas or Florida or something like that. Where did you say you were from originally?
I'm from New Jersey. You
New
know,
Jersey.
yeah, the problem with New Jersey is giant illegal population, giant legal immigration population, and then tons of Puerto Ricans in there.
Yeah.
How do you decipher how many how many mistakes are you going to make if you pull over just brown people with a language accent, right? Um, so they went to, I think it was New York. Didn't go very well in New York for them. Now this was
No.
before it just didn't go well. A big gangbanger population in New York. The Hispanics will not put up with that crap. They'll stand up. And if you want to go where they are, you got to go to the bad sections of New York. You got to go to Compton in Los Angeles. You got to go to not parts of Queens and other places in Jersey. You got to go to Jersey City. You have to go to Newark, New Jersey. All the places where they're just large populations and ICE is vastly outnumbered. They'd almost have to take an army in there to go do what they're going to do. That's why they're picking on the small states. And it didn't go well in Minnesota. So it's probably not going to go well in any other. They were up in Maine, and all they did is just, make it more difficult for Susan Collins to get elected, which is fine with me.
Yeah. Well, the thing with Minneapolis, they thought it's a smaller city. They're Minnesota nice. They go in with 3,000 ICE agents, and then Minnesota comes out in a protest of 70,000 people. What are you going to do with that? Ain't much you can do with that. They're going to
Right.
run you out.
And you can only say so much that these are people from somewhere else and they're paid agitators. 70,000 people are not paid agitators. You can only blame George Soros so much. So they're listen. ICE is losing. I mean, it is losing. It's going to cause some damage on the way out, but it's a losing cause. Will the Democrats? So my question is, will the Democrats hold fast to put some conditions on ICE in return for passing funding for the Department of Homeland?
That would be the play to make. That would make sense. And under normal circumstances, I would say, yeah, they're definitely going to do that because that's the only logical thing to do. But based on what we've seen out of the Democratic Party for the last year or more, I have no confidence, no trust. There doesn't appear to be any uh, testicular fortitude amongst Democrats. And I'm sad to say that because even when they have the leverage, they refuse to use it.
Yep. And like you and Tom were talking about replacing older politicians, and he wasn't for term limits. And you and I have agreed we need to replace the dead wood that's there, but there's so much dead wood. I will say at least they're making an attempt at a struggle. They're saying the words, but I don't see Chuck Schumer in Minnesota standing there
No.
with a sign, right? You don't see Hakeem Jeffries anywhere holding. You don't see those guys out and doing anything. They're just sitting in Washington. Mike Johnson is looking worse and worse and worse. I think I heard you say something about him today. Um, he's getting that little dweeb is getting his ass kicked, and the numbers are dwindling. It's getting tougher and tougher. He's not going to go down in history very well. I mean, Speaker of the House, that is a historical position, up there with the president and up there with, the vice president and the rest. And yet he's demeaned that office so badly. He has failed, and history is going to record it as such.
Well, he's such a little weirdo anyway, and he gets his ass kicked so often. He just stands there with that stupid smirk on his face. I have to wonder if he doesn't have some humiliation kink, because I don't know how you push through that after getting your ass kicked and embarrassed as many times as he has.
Yeah, if it ever came out that he went and saw a dominatrix and she spanks him and puts out cigarettes on his tongue kind of shit, that wouldn't surprise me because he takes such a public beating all the time from all sides. I mean, it's not just the Democrats beating him up; it's just the Republicans are beating up worse. Marjorie Taylor Greene is twice the man he is. It's just that much, right? So I don't know, but I'm hoping. I don't know what I'm hoping from Congress. To be honest, I've given up hope on, like you, from Congress for a long time. But we got some players. We got some players there, and any kind of friction that they can cause, anything that they can get into the news cycle, that shows a little bit of motion or movement or some grit. That's the most we can expect, and I'm okay with it at this point because I don't expect much from them.
Well, with regards to Mike Johnson, the TikTok I did brought up an appearance he did on one of the Sunday programs. He was being interviewed by Kristen Welker, and Kristen Welker kind of pushed on him um, regarding Donald Trump and the FBI going down to Georgia, Fulton County election offices, and basically looting it. Then Mike Johnson basically said, well, there's all the voter fraud in Georgia. And she goes, wait a minute. There's been no proof of that shit. You don't get you don't get to say that when it's not true. And he just kind of bumbled around, and he didn't know what to do. I mean, this is happening all the time. All he can do is go to Donald Trump's dumbass explanations, and they're so stupid they should know better. But that's all they got. So they're
Yeah.
trying as hard as they can.
Yeah, he's a liar, but he's a bad liar. And that's the
Yeah.
problem. Every time he goes in public and he tells a lie, it's an obvious lie. Trump is just mentally deranged. He believes the bullshit he says. I mean, he's going to be a unique figure in history. There's never been one like him before. And it's going to be a long time, I think, before we see another one like him. But Mike Johnson and the rest of the enablers, they know better. JD Vance, he knows better, and he's an even bigger piece of shit than Mike Johnson, if you can say it. I think Mike Johnson, his term is going to be gone, but I think we're going to be stuck with JD Vance through the 28 elections. Johnson is going to be done here in another year, and he'll just be another member of Congress sitting in there trying to hold back a tide for another couple of years.
Well, he may have problems before the end of this year. I don't know if you heard yesterday that Christian Menifee,
Yeah,
he won a special election in Houston, Texas,
Texas.
to take a House seat, which flips it from Republican to Democrat. So that ever so slim margin in the House is even slimmer now. And there are other situations where they could get people quitting early. They could be in a weird situation in the House of Representatives. That margin is so slim now. Somebody dies, somebody gets upset and quits, or there's a special election. They could lose the majority of the House. Now, the Democrats won't get a huge majority if they get it, and that's going to create all kinds of confusion in the House of
Oh, sure,
Representatives.
sure. But it doesn't get anything accomplished now. So, well,
No,
but at least the power of investigation would be in the hands of the Democrats. But there are a lot of Republicans that can see the writing on the wall, and they're not particularly keen on running in 26. So there's already a bunch that are leaving and retiring and saying, I'm out of here. I kind of think there's some more in the wings. I don't know what it's going to take to drive them out, but if we get another killing by ICE or we get some kind of attack on, I don't know, some other weird country like Iceland, I think that might be the one that'll drive a few of them to go, you know what, I just plain quit. They need to follow Marjorie Taylor Greene out the door and attempt to recover a reputation.
but the thing about it is when I hear these people decide to quit, and I'm happy to see them quit, all I can think is, you fucking cowards. You motherfuckers, as much as you have a distaste for what's going on now, you're part of the reason why we're here because from the beginning you supported him. And
That's
now you
right.
want to separate yourself from the stink and you can't do it, so you just run away and quit. Wouldn't it be better if you stayed in your position and try to get people to do the right thing as opposed to just running away and putting your head in the sand? I mean, these people are going to want to run away from Donald Trump because he ultimately will be a pariah when this is all said and done. They're going to try to run away from him, but in my mind, they waited too long. They
I
waited
think
for
so.
it to get too
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. Tom Tillis from North Carolina. I have absolutely no regard for what he's doing now. He can say and do whatever he wants. He's going to retire. He's retiring, so he's opening up his fucking mouth. But at the same time, he voted for half the cabinet that's in there right now. He put his
Right.
stamp on what's going on. He's directly responsible. So no respect's given. Don't let the door hit you. Your political career is done, and as it should be. Go home. But you can say whatever you want. And I'm glad you're saying it, but frankly, don't respect you anyway. Should have said this a long time ago.
I think part of my job, once Donald Trump's out of the mix and we have Democrats hopefully in charge of enough stuff where we can get things straightened out, I think part of my job will be calling out Democrats, of course, because there's plenty that need to be called out. But I think my job is going to be every time one of these Trumplefuck people come up, think they've waited enough time, think they would have people forget about the connection to Donald Trump. They're going to need people like you and me going, no, wait, Tom. Yeah, you got tough toward the end there, but you voted for this and this and this, and you're the reason why we ended up where we ended up. And for you to get mad at the last minute, sorry, that's not enough.
Well, if the country turns around, there's still going to be, I don't know, a third of the Republican Party that is pure MAGA, and they may not want a Trump, but they'll vote for Trump-like figures no matter what. But as far as the other percentage of the Republicans, they got a record now. And if they voted along MAGA lines, they're going to have to defend that record in primaries and they're going to have to defend that record in generals, wherever they are. So they're going to be in disarray. Now, having said that, we face a big challenge uh, ourselves in that certain states have gotten bigger. Texas is going to be picking up 5 or 6 electoral votes. Florida is picking up some electoral votes. New York and California are giving some electoral votes. So we got our work cut out for us because we don't have a blue wall anymore to protect us. Um,
Right.
what they gain, we lose. And if we are in, and unless we can dominate an election by winning other states like Nebraska or Kansas, we may not win statewide offices, and we may not win general elections for the presidency because the electoral advantage, vote advantage, will belong to the Republicans. So the demographics of Hispanics, they haven't really come home to our party yet. I wish they would. They may come for this election and maybe 28, but there's no guarantee that they'll stick. And then, but the change in the electoral college is going to be working against us after 2030.
Well, I think there's been some polling that suggests Republicans are losing some of the Hispanic vote, and it's largely due to these draconian immigration situations. In fact, I know they were talking about the Republicans being concerned about it. They're thinking to themselves, hey, if we keep deporting and hurting Hispanic folks, they might not vote for us. You fucking think? You're just now realizing that? Jesus Christ. So there is some thought that they are losing ground in the Hispanics. There was also a poll that I thought was really telling. Over and above Hispanics and people of color, the big group of people that either side counts on to win an election is the independents.
That's right.
Um, and right now, the poll I saw, and again, you take polls with a grain of salt, but the poll I saw, um, the percentage of independents that support the Republican Party and Donald Trump, 29%. That's not good.
Right, but that's because Donald Trump is here and JD Vance is here. But generally independents tend to lean more conservative than the rest of the population. So once those guys are off the stage, and unfortunately, I don't have a lot of faith in people anymore. They have short-term memories. If they didn't have short-term memories, how did Trump get elected again, right?
Yeah.
And so, in the long run, our party has to fight for every vote in every state. I mean, that's the answer. And they have to find ways to communicate with the younger generations that are taking our place as we boomers leave the scene. And I have yet to actually see them do it. Jeffrey's sitting on the step of the Capitol with a pair of sneakers on TikTok just isn't going to cut it.
Yeah.
That's not a message.
Well, I'm a firm believer when you have a lot of problems like we have, a lot of people get afraid because we've got so many problems to fix. We got to fix all the problems.
Right.
And for me, the best way to deal with situations when I've got a lot of problems is deal with them one at a time.
That's
Deal
right.
with them, get it fixed, move on to the next one, get it fixed, go on to the next one. And in our situation with the current regime, the first thing is to somehow get Donald Trump out of the equation, whether it be 25th Amendment, impeachment, or choking on a big man. I don't really give a fuck, one way or another. Once we get Donald Trump off of the head of the party, the whole dynamic changes. Um, you're talking about, whether independents will vote when Donald Trump's not there. I think in 2026, right now, those people, independents and people of color that are voting against Donald Trump, it's not even just about Donald Trump anymore. They're angry at the Republicans because they're broke. They can't afford groceries. Their farms are being taken away from them. They are mad and they want somebody who is accountable. And the only people that can be accountable are Republicans at this point. So whether Donald Trump is on the ballot or not, I think 2026, the Republicans are going to take a beating just by virtue of how these people were living now. They are living worse than they were a year ago. They're struggling and they're mad. There are more people saying, I've had enough of Donald Trump. And keep in mind, he won that race by 1.5 million votes. It wasn't a lot of people. It wasn't like the Republicans kicked our ass and the Democrats were sucking shit. That wasn't the way it was. It was
That's
very
right.
close. So you don't need that big a change to beat these motherfuckers.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think that the problem that I have with our party is status quo. It doesn't seem like they stretch out and fight hard enough for votes. They sort of say, we got this much money, let's spend it here. Let's pick this old person to run because they've won before rather than this brilliant new, liberal progressive. And they've given up too many states. They've given up the states, not only at the national level, they've given up the states in worst cases in their own politics, so that the Republicans control so many state legislatures. I saw a move afoot um, to try to get the voting back of appointing of senators back to state legislatures. I've heard that more than a few times in the last month. To have the great convention and take it away from the people and put it there. I think it'll happen? I don't know. Do I think they'll try? I do think they'll try because they want control and they've got the money to make things happen. And that's my biggest concern is that they use the resources they have to make that kind of thing happen.
Well, I think the mistake a lot of people made, especially me, I have to own that. When Donald Trump got elected, I thought, well, yeah, okay, he can do some crazy shit, but the Republicans aren't going to go along with that. They're not going to allow it to get that out of hand. And I have to say, I was flat wrong about that. I'm truly amazed that the Republicans haven't tried to push back at all, whether it's cowardice or whether it's complicitness. I don't know what the fuck it is. But when you say, what are they going to do and are they going to do anything? That really is up for question. I look at what's going on with the Republicans. They just need to be completely eradicated. But the Democrats almost really need to be torn down and built up again because we have too many people in the Democratic Party. While they're better than Republicans, they're still in bed with a lot of these oligarchs and they're still choosing not to work for us.
No, you're so totally right. And you can see it, the play down in Georgia with the voting. Um, it's kind of alluding to a thing that they're going to try to do across the country. In Georgia, they narrowly lost some Senate races, and if they can affect the vote in Georgia, then they can take Georgia um, in the next couple of elections. I mean, we should be concerned, but I don't hear the national party being as concerned as you and I are. I don't see the fight in that. I hear some words in Congress, but that's about it.
Well, what you have to understand about the mainstream media and even some of the independent media, they don't really care about the people or the country. They care about making money, and that's where I have a problem with the mainstream media and the cable media and the streaming media. These are profit making ventures first and foremost.
That's
And
right.
they will do whatever they have to do to make the profit. That is the most important thing. The news and validity and accuracy is secondary. Now we even have that with independents too. We have some of the people that are bigger creators on YouTube and TikTok and such like that, and it is all about money to them.
It's
They're
okay.
not quite as well, yeah, they're not quite as egregious as what's on mainstream media, but they do still have limitations as to what they'll talk about, how they will talk about it, because they have sponsors that they have to address. So people have to be very careful where they get their information. And I would suggest to anybody to do exactly what I do. Watch the news, hear of a story, and then shut it off and go dig out from reasonable sources. You can go to HuffPost, you can go to Raw Story, you can go to the AP, you can go to NPR. Dig out those stories and see what the true facts are, and then form your opinion or form your video at that point. Don't just take anything um, firsthand from or third hand from a mainstream media. The stories you're hearing are kind of perverted, kind of twisted, diluted, whatever. And that's the big problem. We've got a lot of people in this country because of the mainstream media that don't have a fucking clue what's going on.
We have a large population that has no ability to do critical thinking. And
No.
unfortunately, the population, as we go away, we who were trained and taught and educated in the 60s and 70s, as we go away, the people following behind us either seem to have less education or they lack the ability to take facts and put them together to come up with a valid conclusion. I see that. I see that all the time. They do avoidance. They don't want to. The young people don't want to talk politics. Now that's a general statement. It certainly doesn't apply to everybody. All you have to do is look at TikTok and you can see there are people who are active, but there's still a sizable part of that generation that either doesn't care or just isn't astute enough or just won't put it together and exercise their citizenship.
There's a faction of people out there that really piss me off. And I felt this way for years. And when I stated that, my family, my friends go, what? That's, don't get so angry about that. But these are the people who will say to you, yeah, I don't watch the news or listen to politics. It's so depressing. I just don't want to get involved in it. I don't want to know anything about it. I just want to live my life. Those people piss me off because those are the people, one of the reasons why we are here today. Because you sat on the couch and didn't want to think about it. Now you're dealing with what you're dealing with now. Staying out of it, not being well informed, that's not a good choice. And now I think some of these people are fucking around and finding out that by sitting on the sidelines with their thumbs in their asses, that they find themselves in a terrible position that they didn't have to had they got involved. I mean, we're seeing it in Minneapolis with 70,000 people going out on the streets. If not for ICE, those 70,000 people wouldn't be out there. But at least they made the commitment and said, fuck it, I've had enough, I'm doing this. And I think more people in this country have to feel that way in order to really have a serious election and people with creative thinking skills actually doing the voting. We've got a long way to go to get to that.
I don't see how we result. Like you go to high school and they have citizenship type um, classes, but the teachers are handcuffed on what they can say and how they can say it, so they
Yeah,
don't say. And so we have a whole generation coming up through the public education system without the ability to understand what the difference is between a Republican, a Democrat, a progressive, a conservative, or an independent. They don't know. And when they get out, they're told, well, you can vote now. They don't know what to vote for. They have no experience in what their duties are as a citizen. And it's been done this way on purpose. If we keep them stupid, then we can manipulate them. I mean,
right.
that's just, and I think that's exactly what's happening countrywide. There are factions, and I hate to be a conspiracy person that want to change the society a certain way. They have certain beliefs, and they are using their resources, which are huge amounts of resources, to try to change every facet of American society. Get the brown people out, keep the population not very bright, buy out all the media so that you put out whatever you want as far as propaganda, and then indoctrinate the citizens to be a certain way. And I don't. I mean, I would like to say we have our own on our side, but it just seems sometimes that we are being overwhelmed by what's going on the right.
Now, if you said what you just said 5 years ago to me, I'd say that's crazy. You're a conspiracy theorist. You're negative about this stuff. That's fucking crazy. But here we sit today, and not only is it going on, there's plenty of evidence that it's going on. We're looking at them trying to push out brown people from this country, whether they're citizens or not. We've got them grifting money in every possible way. We've got them shooting people in the streets. That conspiracy theory that somebody would have thought was crazy 5 years ago is actually coming true. And I hope that's hitting home with some people. There'll be people who say, well, it's not so bad. It doesn't affect me. But it doesn't have to affect you because if this continues down the progress that it's going, it will affect everybody, which means your kids and grandchildren. And if that doesn't concern you, fuck you. You're a selfish motherfucker.
I hear you say this all the time, and it's pretty amazing. You would say, "Yeah, Donald Trump will fuck up anything all the time. Just give him some time, and he's going to fuck it up." And
Yep.
so, the shooting of Preddy And then the discussion that he shouldn't have shown up at the protests with a concealed firearm.
Yeah.
That's a Second Amendment thing. I'm not hearing a lot from the Second Amendment people about their rights being taken away from them. But that doesn't mean that they won't show up to vote and you know and vote in a certain way. If it's a MAGA person and they ask them, well, Freddie shouldn't have been carrying a concealed firearm, right? Is that right? We shouldn't carry. We shouldn't carry. I think they'll vote that person out.
Well, I do too. I think the NRA has kind of pushed back a little bit. It isn't quite as outrageous as you'd expect. But when you look, I said something a long time ago when they overturned Roe v. Wade. I said, look, whether you support abortion or not, the idea that they overturned this constitutional decision should be a red flag to you. Because if they're going to take away one constitutional right, whether you agree with it or not, that means they're going to take more constitutional rights away from you. And here we're looking at that. We're looking at the Fourth Amendment taken away. We're looking at them trying to take away the First Amendment by arresting journalists like Don Lemon. They're looking to take away the Second Amendment by telling you that you're a criminal if you're on the streets with a gun that you have a permit on and carrying legally. This is what I said before, and this is the case with all bullies. It's an old phrase, give them an inch, they'll take a mile. If you don't push back, they'll keep coming and they'll want something more. If he goes to some country about tariffs and said, I want you to do this or I'll put tariffs on, if you bend to him, he'll get what he wants and then he'll come back and want more. That's always the case. That's what he's doing in this country. This is what he's doing internationally. And what's going on with Minnesota, hopefully this is a notice to everybody. You push back, you can get him to back off. Europe did it to him when he said he was going to invade Greenland. When he got over there and talked to the Europeans and said, listen, bitch, we're going to sell all your treasury bonds, we're going to close all your military installments, and then we're going to ice you out from any trade at all. See how long your country economically lasts after that. Came back and he was very quiet about it. Now, I'm not saying he's not going to reintroduce that concept when he forgets about it or gets mad about something. But this is so obvious. Donald Trump's an easy guy to figure out. You push
Right.
back, you slap him in the mouth, and he will back off. So why more media and more politicians haven't done that as yet, I can't explain.
Well, and the corporations. I mean, there are agreements being made amongst the European countries to basically isolate the United States, and they'll do their own stuff. Defense is huge, and now people are going to be buying Swedish or Italian ships, Swedish aircraft, German tanks, and the rest. And they're starting to lock the United States out of not only defense stuff, but trade agreements.
Right.
NATO may still exist in 3 years, but I don't know that it will. But the Europeans, they will handle Russia. They're going to spend the money they need to arm up, keep Ukraine in the fight because it's cheaper for Ukraine to do the fighting than it is for them to do the fighting. But we're being slowly isolated and then economically strangled. So my point is, where are the corporations? They're going to be the big losers in all this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you wonder. I mean, here's what I'm thinking about the international community. They're having a lot of trouble dealing with Donald Trump, and they're shutting things down, and they're trying to put pressure on Donald Trump, and I understand that. I personally think that if Donald Trump keeled over today and the Democrats took over tomorrow, the Europeans would still push some issues just to punish us, just to make sure that it never fucking happens again. Just because Donald Trump is gone doesn't mean everything's going to be bright and sunny and full of unicorns with the international community. We're going to have to do a lot of work. We're going to have to do a lot of things to come back. So now Donald Trump is, you know, my wife says, I hope they all know we don't like Donald Trump either. Yeah, they know, but we're putting them through some things. And they're mad that we were dumb enough to vote for this guy. So in that respect, they kind of hold us responsible, and that's justifiable. So when Donald Trump is gone, they're still going to put us under their thumbs just to make sure we understand that we cannot do this again.
Yeah, the Europeans are cowards. Honestly, I think if Trump was gone, and let's say it's no JD Vance or someone like a JD Vance in office, I think Europeans are more than happy to live back under the umbrella of United States defense.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, because
I hope that's true.
it saves them money in the long run. The only thing that is preventing them and forcing them to rearm is the war in Ukraine. But if the war in Ukraine were to stop, they'd be very happy for us to take up the defense of Europe as they did before, because they got a peace dividend. We didn't get a peace dividend. They got the peace dividend after the fall of Com. If Putin dies, and he'll die someday, and I don't know that anybody can replace Putin, just like I don't think anybody can replace Donald Trump. Then I don't, they've lost a million four
Yeah.
casualties over in Russia. And they're not going to want to keep on, the Putin replacement's not going to want to keep going with that because their economy is starting to shatter. It can't keep up with this. The only thing keeping them going is they're bringing in foreign soldiers from all different countries and Africa and places like that to fight for them, and they're not doing very well either. And the fact that they're able to mass produce drones and the same thing, just like the Ukrainians. Maybe not as good as the Ukrainians, but what they can't mass produce themselves, they can buy from places like Iran and probably get smuggled out of China. So I think the Europeans, but having said that, now that's just strictly in defense. I think it'll go back to the way it was under a Democrat. But what I don't think will be put back are the economic relationships that are being built that are now leaving us out of them. I think that's going to be a hard thing to replace worldwide.
Well, having been in business myself, if you lose a customer and they find another source for um, for whatever services or products they were buying from you, and they go to another source, it's going to be hard to get them back no matter what. It's going to have to be cheaper or easier, and then that means whoever is in our country, the companies, are going to make less money just to get the work back. Um, yeah, I think you're probably right about that. Militarily, we offer quite a lot um, to Europe, but
Yeah, and it's not even so much the ships and the aircraft and the weapon systems. It's the intelligence architecture, it's the satellites, it's the secret programs that you and I don't have access to, or that the Europeans do. There's just a network in there. I mean, Ukraine is not fighting without American help right now. Even though Donald
right.
Trump is, Ukraine is doing some pretty cool things, and I can almost guarantee that a lot of their strikes that they're making deep within Russia have they're getting that information from U.S. intelligence. Strikes are too accurate. I don't think the Europeans have the network for that. Not the British, not the Germans, not the French. I think the behind the scenes, the Americans are still supporting Ukraine. It's just being kept quiet. But economically, look at Canada, opening up trade relationships with China.
Yeah.
That's bad. That's bad for us. That's real bad for us. We won't get them back.
No, we won't get them back. And the big problem here is a problem that Donald Trump's had all his life. At this point, economically, even if Donald Trump isn't there anymore, we've lost their trust. And when it comes to the economy, trust is a big deal. If you can't count on your source to do whatever it is they're going to do, you go someplace that's safer, even if it costs a little bit more or if it's a little different. And I think what I've heard Europeans say, yeah, Donald Trump sucks and he's the problem, but Americans still voted for him. So if they voted for him the first time, how do we know they're not going to do it the next time? We're going to have to go through a couple of elections and to heal this situation before we regain any trust from the European countries or the Scandinavian countries.
Or South American countries.
Yeah.
And we've got 3 more years with this guy, and he's gonna put in a pet Fed chair in 6 months. How much who will lower interest rates, cause massive inflation here, but will do serious damage to our economy.
Right.
because he'll be doing exactly what Donald Trump tells him to do. A failed businessman will be guiding our economy. And so who knows what the central bank is going to screw up with under a pet Fed chair that he has. So yeah, I mean, we got a lot more damage coming, and I think the Europeans are going to isolate themselves from a lot of that. If we go into an inflation, it used to be the whole world went into inflation, right? If we crash, they crash with us. I think they know that this is coming, and I think they are slowly cutting the ties to isolate themselves from the disease that the United States of America has become.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're just trying to cover their asses at this point. They see the sinking ship. They see us going over a cliff, and anybody with enough sense would stand clear of it so they don't get sucked into it. Republicans apparently don't have that foresight. But you say he's here for 3 years. I hope that's not true. I mean, theoretically, he's won a election and he's got 3 more years. But we've got his health issues. If he truly crashes the economy, at some point, Republicans have to stand up and say, "A fucking enough is enough." Now, I've said that before, and they haven't said it as yet. But I got to believe if oligarchs all around the country, all around the world, are losing money by the bucketfuls, somebody's going to try to put a stop to this bullshit one way or another.
Yeah, listen, I've been following like Amazon. So far, Amazon hasn't been hurt.
Yeah.
You know, Walmart hasn't been hurt. Apple hasn't been hurt. Stock
Target
market,
has.
yeah, well, Target is the poster child for people saying, I don't need to buy anything from Target. I can just buy it from Amazon and it'll be more convenient. So yeah,
Right.
It Target's business model and then politics on our side has hurt Target. I never thought Target was the bad guy, to be honest. Did they bend a little bit? Yes. Should they may have been maybe slightly punished? Yes, but there are worse transgressors than Target. Walmart and Amazon are so much worse than they are. Home Depot, you just name it. Yeah,
Yeah.
but the fact is that the big companies, the ones are still making tons of dough, so they haven't been hurt. And so what the Europeans need to do is try to cut ties with those international corporations and let them suffer a little bit because
Yeah.
I don't those kind of companies can't just live on the American market.
I want to bring up something that's obviously a big story, and we were talking about it before we got on, and that, of course, is the Epstein file situation.
Oh my God.
I find it ironic that the Epstein files were put out there, and Donald Trump attempted to distract from the Epstein files by going into Venezuela, by sending troops into Minneapolis and creating that mess to distract from Epstein's files. Then they go in and kill a couple of people in Minneapolis, and the blowback is fucking huge, and Donald Trump is shitting himself. So he goes to the Epstein files to distract away from fucking Minneapolis. It's just,
It's
what
Trump.
in
He's
the
gonna fuck it
actual
up.
fuck? Yeah,
Yeah,
he'll
yeah.
fuck it up.
I mean, there is a law. Um, I am not positive what Congress could have done if they didn't release that stuff. But now that they've released it, a lot of it is just allegations. The FBI didn't actually investigate anybody. So the cover up continues. But the allegations that were put together into a list made it easier to see what Donald Trump has been accused of doing, whether he's done it or not has done it, and it's horrific. Uh,
It is horrific. I mean, we're talking about rapes, we're talking about groping young kids, we're talking about murders, literally murders.
Murder. Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yes.
and there is no gray area here. What they were saying specifically was involving murders and threats of murder and that sort of thing. I mean, what we're seeing in this is absolutely horrific. Now, they released 3 million files. They've got 3 million more, but they're trying to say, well, that's all we can release. No, bitch, that's not what the law said. It said release all of them and only redact the victims' names. Well, they put out 3 million. They redacted a lot of the wealthy people's names, and they didn't redact many of the victims' names. So, what is it they're trying to accomplish? The DOJ, by doing this and putting out the victims' names, they are taking part in trying to intimidate and terrify those victims because they know if the names are out there, they're going to get attacked by the red meat eating, mouth breathing Trumplafucks. We've seen it time after time. So they've broken about every law they can possibly break. But people keep saying, we need the other 3 million, we need this. Frankly, in what I've seen in the files that have been sent out, I've heard enough. And they'll say, well, there's no evidence. And I'll say, okay, that's fair enough. But my question is, some of this stuff is decades old. Please explain to me why there has been no investigation. If somebody makes a credible complaint and can give you some facts, at the very least, you should investigate it. The fact that you chose not to investigate it tells me that you may be complicit in a cover up in this situation. So, when you hear these stories about this woman who said they had these calendar parties and they had these young
Yeah,
girls there
yeah,
and
yeah,
they were measuring things and,
yeah,
doing all
yeah,
kinds of
yeah,
horrible
yeah.
things and threatening, how does that not justify an investigation? But there was no investigation. So let's not convict anybody right now. Let's start having some investigations. Let's look at the evidence that is no doubt out there that we're not seeing now and look into it, especially when it involves somebody like Donald fucking Trump.
Well, can you imagine probably what has not been released might even be worse for Trump than what has already been released?
I
You
suspect
know,
that's true,
Yeah, and
which is
so
crazy.
so they're just re-victimizing the poor women who were trafficked.
Yeah.
It goes on. But in all honesty, I don't, for the life of me, can't understand why the women themselves, they're surrounded by an army of lawyers and advocates. They must have a list of people themselves, you know, and
Well,
maybe
they're
they're
afraid
just
to get they're afraid to get sued into oblivion because while they have some lawyers and stuff, they don't have a lot of money. But when you get a billionaire like Larry Ellison, who just bought TikTok, who was at Epstein Island,
yeah.
what's Larry going to do if? I mean, we already heard a story about Bill Gates. Bill Gates is already backstepping here and saying, "Oh, it's not true. It's all fake news." Not everything can be fake news. If you get complaint after complaint after complaint, how can you say it's all a hoax and everybody's wrong and you're right? It just sounds ridiculous after a while.
Well, I think when the Democrats take the House, the Democrats can read a list of names and don't have to worry about being sued. I mean, that's what Marjorie Taylor Greene said she was going to do, and she didn't do it. So I think, but do I think Hakeem Jeffries would have the balls to do it? No, I don't. I really don't. But I hope that they
No,
do.
he won't.
I hope Epstein stays on the calendar for the House in various committees, for a couple of years, so we can set up the next election after this. But I do think there's been a little bit of a backlash and on the right between with some of the podcasters and other influencers that have there, and that's good to
Yeah,
see.
yeah.
The Epstein files was a big thing for them, and they don't want to be affiliated with powerful pedophiles. They just don't. And I'm surprised at the Republican Party. Maybe it's been too quick and too fast, but we have not heard really a lot from the Republican Party. We just haven't. They're continuing to say allegations, not true, fake, all this other bullshit.
Well, it's funny. During Biden's campaign or Biden's term, we heard all these claims from QAnon and whoever else that there's a Democratic cabal that is molesting and killing children and drinking various vital fluids to as a fountain of youth and Pizzagate and all that stuff. and it and all of it sounded crazy and outlandish and stuff, but it is truly the essence of projection. Because while it's not all the same things, the stuff we're hearing in the Epstein files are just as crazy and just as egregious as the Republicans claim the Democrats have done.
Oh,
I
sure,
mean,
sure,
when
absolutely.
they said that, when QAnon and everybody was saying that, you go, "Oh, that's just fucking crazy. Don't even talk to me about that." And now we see what is being reported and what the complaints are. It's not just some old guy touching a young girl. Not as though that isn't bad enough, but it's way worse than that. It
It,
is kind of a cabal. It is kind of a network. And I think you have to agree with me something I said before. The idea that Donald Trump was just one of the patrons that would go in there and use the services, a little fucking crazy. I think Donald Trump was part of the business. And I think he was one of the top guys in the business to make all this shit happen.
yeah, I truly believe that horny old Trump, with his thing for his daughter Ivanka, there's no doubt in my mind that he's a pedophile. I don't know about, there's some horrific things in here about murder and somebody got pregnant and then Trump killed the baby. And I don't, my mind can't even go down that path, though it can go down the path of the pedophiles. But if these are powerful enough men, they, it is not too far to imagine that if they felt threatened, that they would sink some money into some fixers who would fix things for them. And by fix things, it's exactly what I mean is that they would go as far as they needed to go to fix things.
Well, and that's the thing that I find so confusing for myself. If I'd heard these stories 10 years ago, I go, that's just crazy tabloid bullshit. And when I hear it now, that's my first go-to in my mind. It's just crazy tabloid bullshit. But when I look at Donald Trump and the Republicans that are involved, I have to, just based on what I've seen and what I've heard and what I know, I have to go, it's possible. It's crazy and maybe it's not, but I have to believe that it's possible with how horrible these motherfuckers are.
There's stuff in there about Russian girls, and there's rumor or innuendo that Epstein did have a good relationship with Putin and the Russian government
And
and
Israel.
and Israel. And I think Maxwell's father was found floating in, I don't know, a river or in the ocean. So he died mysteriously. Um, so when you think back to the Russian files, right? The Russia files, you go, yeah, was this really a honeypot, operation that lured in famous and wealthy and powerful Americans on behest of the Russians using Epstein as a go-to where they sunk money into Epstein? Because to this day, I don't even know. Epstein, I know, had a pet billionaire in his pocket that he did a lot of work for, but where did he get all his money from? It wasn't just from that source. So,
That was the
I don't know.
beginning. It was Les Wexner, and he's
Yeah,
a very, very wealthy guy. And I think initially he got his money from there, but let's be perfectly honest, blackmail was the key to all of this stuff, or people just continued to feed him money to give them a place to go for whatever weird shit they wanted to do.
yeah, Prince
Um,
Andrew.
Prince Andrew. I mean, there's a picture of Prince Andrew in these latest files where he's on his hands and knees kind of over what looks like a little girl. You can't see
Looks
her
like a little
face,
girl. Yeah.
but she looks like she's unconscious, based on the way her body is doing. I don't know what the deal with that is, but that's troubling. And if Prince Andrew was doing this shit, part of royalty in England, he wasn't the only one. I mean,
No.
these people showed up and either wanted to participate or wanted to watch. And as far as I'm concerned, whether you participated or not, if you knew what was going on and you were there, you're just as guilty.
Yeah, I mean, there's one person who knows the whole story, could put it all together for us, and she's currently in, a low security jail, prison. And I I just wish there was a way of getting the information out of her. I don't know.
But she's a convicted liar, so you can't believe
No,
anything she says unless it's
no,
going to benefit her.
no,
I mean, she
that's
said
exactly
something
right.
recently. She said something recently that there were 29 co-conspirators
That's
that
right.
were figured into a deal that Jeffrey Epstein got. The deal, part of the deal was we're going to give you this sweetheart deal, and part of the deal is we can't go after anybody else that was your co-conspirators. That's and her premise is, well, then that should include me, and I was convicted wrongly because of the deal we had in Miami. Um, I was talking to Tom Powell about this and other folks. Todd Blanche was being interviewed after the release of the 3 million files, and he was asked, well, what about the names of the co-conspirators? And Todd Blanche pretty much said, well, we've got no evidence where we can file charges against any other party in this whole situation. And here's my problem with that. You've got two people, Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. They were convicted of trafficking. They were found guilty of trafficking. Now, the essence of trafficking is taking young girls and handing them off to other people that will commit the sexual crimes against these girls or boys. The idea that there is nobody else you can prosecute would suggest that Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein shouldn't be in jail because they're convicted of trafficking. But if they didn't traffic to anybody, it's just such a lame attempt. It's such a widespread cover up. And I think this cover up is so blatant that it's going to come back to haunt like Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and Donald Trump and other people in the Trump organization. Because I think when Donald Trump is gone, this shit's going to come pouring out.
Oh
It's
yeah,
going to come pouring out.
yeah, yeah. If we get a Democratic president, we get say Jack Smith as Attorney General. That's who I'm pulling for. Um, I think the Epstein files are a good place to start. And if nothing else, release the truth. Those files are files, so they still exist in the Department of Justice. They're not going to go away. And what
No,
can be redacted could be unredacted. My guess
right.
is, right? I mean, so the redactions are probably digital. I don't think there's somebody with a magic marker going over a million pieces of paper. So if it can be unredacted, and we have a Jack Smith, and we have a very hostile to, Congress that is run by that Democrats, I think we can start to pull stuff out because the Democrats should be hungry to use this as a cudgel against the Republicans for not having done anything. But I say that, but the fact is, I'm still pissed at Biden and the attorney general there for not moving on any of this. They had
Yeah.
this information and they could have used it and they could have used it as a cudgel. And Merrick Garland will go down in infamy as probably one of the worst attorney generals ever in the history of that office. And frankly, I don't think Joe Biden's reputation is repairable, even in a historical sense. He they should have been working on this. They had a way of sparing us from this monster in the office, and they didn't take it.
Well, yeah, and the thing about it is while I like Biden, I thought he was a fair enough president. He did a lot of good things. There's no question. He looks way better when you compare him to Donald Trump on either side of Biden's term. But Biden was too much establishment and didn't want to play those games. The fatal mistake that Biden and Merrick Garland made was not to prosecute Donald Trump from the get-go. Now, when he put Merrick Garland in, it seemed like a reasonable choice. But when Merrick Garland didn't do anything for the first 6 months, Biden should have fired him, but he didn't. And then you've got the Jeffrey Epstein things. I think part of the reason why Biden and the Democrats didn't put it out there is because they got as much invested into the rich oligarchs too. And there are some Democrats in this
Oh,
as
sure.
well. So they slow walked it. They said, better off we just don't talk about it and forget about it. That's what their plan was, the Democrats. And that would be the case with the Republicans too. The only stupid thing is the Republicans brought it up in the campaign because they thought it would help them, and it did. But then they never thought they'd have to be accountable for it. That's just fucking ignorant.
Well, again, bravery by the victims coming out into the open
Yeah.
and risking their reputations and their new lives, and talking about this. And you know, even in the background, I can't think of her name. She's running for governor in North Carolina, I think, or maybe here. She came out crying out of a meeting with the victims. So there's a story to be told here. There's a lot of emotional stories to be told, and hopefully there will be accountability. Maybe not justice, but maybe accountability. And whether be it a Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. Bill Clinton stinks. I can tell you that right now. I didn't like him when he was in office, but right now he's stinking pretty badly.
Well, if you said to me Bill Clinton's involved in this and complicit in this whole thing, I'm not surprised. And honestly, I don't care. He hasn't been president for what, 25 years?
Something like
Who
that. Yeah.
cares? Who
Yeah.
cares? He's out of business. I don't care. Same with Joe Biden. You can say whatever you want about Joe Biden. He's not the president anymore. He doesn't mean anything to me anymore. Nice old guy, a good president, but that's old news, man. We've got to deal with what's going on here. You
Right.
know, I've often said that I didn't think the files would be released until Donald Trump is gone, and I'm kind of half right and half wrong on that. But no one can tell me that there aren't other people that have access to files that could be just as damaging to Donald Trump and any number of other people. I mean, how did the King of England know that they better cut ties with the prince well before all this stuff was out? You know they've seen some stuff. You know they have some stuff. You know Russia has some stuff. You know that Israel has some stuff. You know that we know that the members of the oversight committee have come out and said, "Oh, I've seen some pretty horrific pictures." Well, we haven't seen them. They've seen them. They know what's up, and they haven't done anything about it by releasing them or doing anything further in Congress. So there's plenty of people who have access to documents that could pretty much end the careers of a lot of people, including Donald Trump. My question is, why don't they just put it out there and put an end to this thing? And I think they're all afraid, or they're saddled up to all these wealthy people. And it's not just Donald Trump pressuring Congress not to release this stuff. There are people like Bill Gates. There are people like Larry Ellison. There are other people that are very wealthy that don't want this out either, and they have their ways of pressuring. I'm not going to give you money, or I'm going to hire a hitman or something. Who knows what's going on out there? This is pretty damaging stuff. It's going to end a lot of careers once it gets out there. I don't know if you heard this. Um, Donald Trump. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Donald Trump has picked who he wants to take over as the Fed chair in
I
May,
have. I have.
and I think his name is Worf or something like that.
Yeah. That's
Uh,
that's what it is.
his name is in the Epstein files too.
Yeah. I mean, I saw somebody reading like the numbers for people mentioned in the files. So in his case, I believe his name was mentioned in terms of economic activity. So and there's a lot. There's quite a. I mean, there's quite a few people in there, like Bannon. Bannon was probably a friend of Epstein's, but you're seeing just names come up that were in texts or emails having to do with economics and things like that. So more mundane stuff.
It's mundane in that sense, but again, whether they were involved with the touching and the sexual assault of young girls, if they knew it was happening and they still chose money
That's
or
right.
entertainment or flights or
That's right.
vacations, to me, they're just as guilty. They're just
Absolutely.
as complicit.
If you went to the island for a party, you had to have seen young girls there. Look
Yeah.
at Elon Musk. Musk wanted to go there to party. And there's no sign in anything I've heard in the last few days that he actually got to go there because supposedly Epstein didn't like him very much. That's no surprise. But it wouldn't surprise me that somehow he ended up at parties, with young girls. I hope they find him because I'd like to see that guy taking down a bunch of pegs. But there had to have been, and there are common people that were involved in working for Epstein that probably could be coerced into telling what they saw. There's a deposition in there about a guy who, and he says he saw Trump do a bunch of different things, and he
Yeah.
knew his life would be on the line. So there's a deposition that's not getting enough press, and it's a guy who swears to whatever. The shame of this whole thing is that law enforcement protected the wealthy and the powerful. That is
The
that
criminals.
Yeah, the actual criminals, and didn't help the victims. Thousands and thousands of victims worldwide, and the rich and powerful got away with what they got away with. Lives destroyed, horrific things done, and with these girls may never see justice, may never see anybody put in jail where they belong. But if we can just ruin their reputations, I guess that's the best we can hope for at this point.
But if any of this stuff is real, we're talking about murders too. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, if that's real.
if that's real. And now here's the thing people say, well, it's not real, it's fake, it's hoax. We've got emails from Jeffrey Epstein basically explaining what was going on in certain circumstances and what Donald Trump was involved in. That's not absolute evidence, but it's pretty good circumstantial evidence, certainly worth investigating too. We should see every email that Jeffrey Epstein sent out. We should see every email of people that responded to Jeffrey Epstein, like we're seeing bits and pieces now. It's one thing for somebody to come in and make a claim, like a lot of these women did. Well, he did this, he did that. I believe the women, but I understand how they can say, well, anybody can make that up. Yeah, but everybody's making up the same stories, and you can corroborate those stories with the different complaints. One person says something about something, and then somebody else corroborates that same circumstance, but a different offense. That's got to tell you that there might be some validity here. But when Jeffrey Epstein and some of these people like Howard Lutnick say, hey, I want to come to a party, that's pretty damning. It's not that hard to prove that it actually came from their email. And if it did, that may not be enough evidence to convict somebody, but it's certainly enough evidence to get somebody indicted and do an investigation and do a trial.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. And I just, right now it's fighting in the news cycle with what's going on in Minnesota. And
Right.
I'm not, and it was as always, they let it out on a Friday afternoon, hoping it would kind of die out. So this coming week, starting tomorrow, we'll see which one wins the news cycle. If Epstein continues to win the news cycle for a while, then we might see more traction and more action on the issue. But right now, the Republicans in Congress said, well, we passed the law, and that's as far as they wanted to go because it had died out because of, Greenland and then followed that with Venezuela and then followed that with Minnesota. They got what they wanted. The Epstein files were knocked off, and they weren't the protectors of the pedophiles anymore. So I'm hoping the Epstein thing continues to blow up.
Yeah, I do too. We're coming to the end here, and I just wanted to bring up one thing. I don't know if people understand this or not, but we are currently in a government shutdown. Today, Monday, as you're listening to this, we are in a government shutdown. There has been no resolution by the House and the Senate together to cut a deal. Now, there's talks that there might be a deal, and then Lindsey Graham gets butthurt because he's not going to be able to sue the government. So that throws everything, a wrench into everything. What do you think is going to happen here? Are we going to have a long-term shutdown, or is it going to be short-term?
No, I think it'll be short term. I think that the Republicans in Congress will put some limits on ICE or not. Because, Trump doesn't care if the government's shut down.
No.
And I don't, and I can't really see the Democrats holding out for a long period of time. Can you?
I personally, if it were me, I would shut everything down until I got everything I wanted, from ACA subsidies to ICE being pulled back to whatever I wanted. And people will say, well, then people will get hurt. All I have to say about that is already people getting hurt. We've got to have some leverage to stop the people who are currently getting hurt. And if that means hurting more people in the process, and that's our only option, then maybe we have to do it. I don't like that option, but everything else they've tried hasn't worked. The one thing that made them nervous is shutting down the country. And then the Democrats cave in and they do whatever they do, and they hope that, well, we'll get these subsidies argued at another date. And of course, they get shit on again because that's how it always goes. Democrats don't have a lot of strength right now. They keep coming out and telling us,
Yeah.
well, just hold tough in 2026. We'll get it back. And I don't think that's an acceptable answer. They should be
No,
doing other
no,
things.
no,
And this is
no.
the one thing they can do to apply some pressure. And if they refuse to do that, then to me, the Democratic Congress is not worth anything to me.
If they made the case to get the masks off the masked men, right,
Yeah,
and not allow coverage, if that's all they got out of there, they could make a case. We're going to close the government until we have transparency here that the ICE agents and the Border Patrol cannot wear masks. I, I, I think the American public would buy that. They're seeing a bunch of thugs run around. It's their worst fucking nightmare. It's a bunch of Nazis running around doing things to people with their faces covered up. That's so un-American that you think you could take somebody from middle of Alabama and say, "What do you think about this?" and they wouldn't like it. So
right.
if nothing else, if they got that one thing and they shut the government down until they got that one thing, they can use that. They could use that to beat up the Republicans day in and day out. We will not let the government reopen until ICE takes the mask off. They don't need the mask to do law enforcement. If
So
they
I
get
heard
them,
some.
go
I
ahead.
heard somebody say that somebody predicted that if they forced them to take the mask off, as many as 80% of ICE would just quit.
That's fine. They're pieces of shit anyway. That'd be fine.
Yeah.
Plus, a lot of them are probably shouldn't be there anyway. They're Proud Boys or some other militia kind of thing, or neo Nazis or something like that.
No
With
question.
the with the masks off, they'll now be in full view. That'll be a stink of its own because
Yeah.
these people will be identified. Won't look good. And I think the Republicans would. I don't know that the Republicans would fight tooth and nail for that, but if the Democrats are skillful enough to just go for the mask and just the mask alone, there's a lot that we can gain from that effort.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We're going to wrap up the Rational Boomer
Yep.
podcast. Thank you for showing up today and having a nice conversation. It's always
Yeah.
good to talk to people who
Well, and
have an
Tom
understanding of what's
Powell
going on.
is a tough act.
Yeah, yeah, Tom's great. I love Tom. Like I said, I wasn't sure how I would relate to Tom, because he's a grumpy old man and I'm a grumpy old man, and it could go south easily, you know.
Yeah.
But I was pleasantly surprised. He's a great guy, nice guy, smart guy. He's successful in his own right, doing what he's doing in social media. And I asked him flat out. I said, obviously, Tom, you're very successful doing what you're doing. You had 1 million followers on TikTok. You got 300,000 followers on YouTube, which is just crazy to me. And I'm doing okay too with TikTok, not as well as he was, or even on YouTube, but I'm doing far more than I ever thought I would do. I said, did you ever imagine a couple of guys that look like us actually garnering any attention um, on social media? And he said the same thing I would say. No, I have no idea why people watch my shit. And, but I did come up with a reason. He made a point. He said, I just come out here and just be myself and say what I think. And from what I hear from other people, I think authenticity is maybe a rare thing to find in social media and in mainstream media. If someone's just being themselves, apparently there's a certain amount of traction to that.
Yeah, you guys come off as non-polished but true blue Americans. You don't come off as, well, I worked in politics for X amount of years for, George Bush, and now I have a podcast. And there's nothing wrong with that kind of knowledge and their connections. But we need guys like you two guys, that speak for the rest of us. What I found when I was listening to him yesterday, and he said he thought about leaving the United States and moving someplace else, but he said, "Fuck it, I'm going to stay and fight." It made me think, all right, Tom, all right, Mike, all right, Tony, stay and
Yeah.
fight. Because I've thought, man, Portugal or Spain or one of those places is looking better and better all the time. But the fact is, this is our country, and we need to be here and put our voices and our bodies in line when the opportunity, and fight for the right. And the people of Minneapolis set an example. I thought the Portland people were amazing, but the
Yeah.
Minneapolis people went above and beyond that. They may not have had a green turtle man, but man, they were out there in sub-zero temperatures, and and fighting for the right causes in a much more dangerous situation than any of the other cities have had. So God bless them for doing that.
Last thing, because you're up in the eastern part of the country, there was a lot of talk that they were going to go into Philadelphia. And I've never been to Philadelphia, but I know people from Philadelphia. And all I can say is, I hope they go to Philadelphia. If they think Minnesota was rough, fuck.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. No, people in Pennsy are. Well, first of all, I hope that if they do, Pennsylvania is one of those states that they need for their own general election. They're just going to piss off the people of a
Yeah.
big state, and good, fine. And then I think they're going to get their asses handed to them. They're not going to be able to pull the same shit. I think Minnesota was a lot of Bovino and a lot of Christy Nome bullshit. And I think, well, one's been sent to El Centro, California. We'll never see him again. And
No.
I hope something bad happens to him out there. And the other has sort of been, she's been defanged. Her reputation is shot. I don't think she'll be able to run for dog catcher after this.
No, I think
Same
she's
thing with,
done it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We hadn't heard much about Tulsi Gabbard till, 2 days ago when they did this thing in Georgia. I think her reputation is shot. I think Pam Bondi is done. I think, I don't know if Christy Nome has a law degree, but Pam Bondi does. I think that law degree might disappear
Well,
after.
I think both of them are in a position to be prosecuted ultimately when Republicans are out of control
Yeah,
because Pam Bondi, if for no other reason than the cover up, we know how people hate the cover ups.
yeah,
John
yeah.
Mitchell went to jail for a cover up. Pam Bondi is far worse than what John Mitchell did.
Absolutely. Cash Patel, gone. Christy
Yeah.
Nome, probably gone. Christy Nome is directly responsible for the deaths that have been caused by ICE. There's got to be some accountability for that. Well, listen, I appreciate you having me on. I mean, I contacted you when today, and
Yeah.
you usually said, yeah, come on tonight. And it's was an absolute. I got a fireplace going over here. We're having spring weather of about 28 degrees, and which is nice in Minnesota, I guess.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but this was a good night after all the
Well, tell
events over the last few weeks.
well tell people where they can find you because you're online in a number of places, and
Oh my God.
people will want to seek you out.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, I run a lightsaber combat school in my hometown, Aiken Saber Academy. So that's Facebook. I run an international group for lightsaber instructors around the world. You have to be one of those to get on there. I'm on Blue Sky under T Night 02. I'm up to about 34,000
Wow.
people follow me now. So little by little, that's kind of being built up. I'm not an influencer, so you don't have to worry about me. I appear here because this is something I believe in, and this is a mechanism of talking about those beliefs. I try not to be too pushy. Mike likes me having on. He's extended an invitation for me to be on anytime, but I don't think you want to see this old pug face too often. So I kind of wait for the news to be horrific, and then I go, okay, I'm angry enough to be on. And Mike gives me that privilege of doing it.
Well, they have to look at this face virtually every day, whether it be a podcast, TikToks, YouTube, whatever. I'm here every day, whether they fucking like it or not, and I'm like a bad penny. I just don't go away.
I don't know,
Um,
brother. You've been looking more and more handsome to me, I think. I don't know what's going on, but you seem to be de-aging.
I'm not de-aging, definitely not that. Well, those of you listening, I want to thank you for taking the time to do that. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.